Hello, folks. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming to the session. We'll get started shortly, but maybe another minute or two for last-minute entrance.
I wonder if we have to keep sitting. It feels like a professor taking a class.
Well, we can get started. So this session is essentially on how we can segment our customer base for food service industry primarily to drive savings from last mile route optimization. So this is a case study. So we did this case study as BCG was a partner, and we provided the technology for one of BCG's customer. And today we have Vishal, who's a partner at BCG, to present along with me, founder at Lambda. Vishal, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, these are too many bullets, but let me keep it short. I'm a partner in Boston Consulting Group. I've been in consulting space for about 15-ish years, and before that I was a production engineer in the auto space. Been around supply chain planning, network, logistics area all this while, so feel pretty comfortable in this place. I have gotten the opportunity to work in large transformations around network, carve-outs, integrations, and I've been able to consistently been in teams who were able to deliver like the logistics savings in the higher 10s, early 20s, sometimes even 30 to 40%, depending on the situation, depending on what we're trying to solve for. So very passionate about bridging analytical solutions like Lambda in this case, and try to find a way to practically execute them and actually bank the savings, not just see them in Excel sheets. So we'll be talking a little bit about what we did in this particular instance for one of our food distributor clients and what we were able to achieve and how we did it, what it took to sustain the savings, capture them, and retain them for longer. So yeah, happy to answer any questions along the way. Please feel free to stop us in the middle of it.
Thanks, Vishal, to keep the presentation more interactive. A little bit about myself. I founded Lambda in 2021, March. Prior to that, I was working with Deloitte, doing supply chain consulting, network optimization, similar background as Vishal. In fact, me and Vishal go back, long back. Started our consulting careers at Deloitte. And then like at Lambda, we are using technology to solve problems. So we're pushing the boundaries of network optimization with OptiFlow, which is a SaaS platform for doing network design and route optimization. And we love solving challenges which have not been solved before. So thanks to our partners like BCG, so we are able to get exposed to unsolved problems. So this particular case study is for a food distributor, large food distributor. And their network, while looks simple on the page, but it's very complex. It's, they have depots, multiple depots delivering to restaurants, which are then fulfilled from the DCs, what they call stocking locations, which are replenished from the vendor locations, the source locations. And each DC has 10 to 15 depots to maintain customer service. And they have their own territories of restaurants. Restaurants come and go, customers drop in, drop out. And all those routes have to be, kept optimized from delivery standpoint. And there are challenges which we'll discuss soon about. But this industry is unique with respect to a lot of cost is really in the last mile. And they have to maintain customer service, and they have to deliver products on time.
So just to give you the context, I think we're talking about 200 plus DCs or depots, 200 plus locations being managed by the client every day, about 3,000 plus trucks or routes going out to deliver to the customers every day, 24 hours a day. Like usually they would run 2 to 3 shifts a day, which means the trucks would be going out anywhere from like 4 a.m. to like 9 p.m., depending on the type of customer. So pretty comprehensive, pretty diverse set of customers, and hence the problems that come with it to find optimization.
About 3,000 vehicles, I think 3,000 to 5,000 vehicles per month is what they had, their own fleet.
Yeah. A little bit more about the client and the objective of our project, our study, this one. So on the onset, it started by the motivation behind picking up such a project was to reduce the operating expenses of operating such a large fleet, which very quickly turned into what are we trying to solve? What levers should we pull or could we pull to achieve that reduction in cost? Are we talking about reducing the service? Are we talking about keeping the same service but being less resilient? Or are we talking about finding the right balance between the cost and service? And for what subset of customers, for what subset of products, in which subset of geographies? So those are the kind of permutations and combinations we were quickly dealing with. Hence, an analytical, fact-based way to look into it and justify the decisions was basically the need of the hour. Otherwise, we would have lost our sanity. You could not do something like this without backing up with numbers. So that's the approach we took. We looked at both customer archetyping, which basically means which customer should be awarded what type of service. So profiling the customers, we looked at archetyping our service. Like when we say these customers will get differentiated service, what do we exactly mean? Which levers can we think of them as knobs? Like how much can we turn down which knobs for each specific customers and each specific DC or region. So that's something which went into it. So these are just give me an example of a couple of decisions we had to take to get to this objective of optimizing our last mile, cost and service. Happy to answer questions as we get into it, but just laying the context so that everybody follows what we tried to achieve here.
Thanks, Vishal. So what we learned of, this route optimization is something which is being used, and there are multiple technologies, softwares which provide it. But from technological standpoint, what we have seen is that there is dynamic routing and there is standard routing or static routing. And different industries deploy different methods. The very highly mature companies like Amazon deploy completely dynamic routing, right? Because orders, customers change, and they have to reroute things. And then there are companies which don't need to operate that level of maturity, so they're operating on low level of maturity, where most routes are standards. And it's not just because of like technological capability, just the companies want to keep routes standardized, so that they provide better service and standard service, same drivers to customers, so on and so forth. So depending on which industry you are in and your business requirements, you can have dynamic and standard routes. But one thing which is to be noticed is that the legacy tools, because of computational complexities, and it took hours to create these routes. And what we have seen, the paradigm shift which is happening is with advancements in computing, especially GPU-based routing. You can generate these routes in under, like, it's 100 times faster. You can generate these routes 3 to 5 minutes, what would take like 3 to 4 hours to generate all these routes across different DCs. So that's where the industry is headed, and we'll see more of companies adopting dynamic routing over static routing.
Yeah. If you go back for 1 second, let me just set the context for the slide. Our client, the study that we are referring to in this one, this particular client was more on what we would call low maturity in this framework. When we say low maturity, it was by design. They wanted to keep similar routes every day for their drivers to have enough sanity to control attrition. They wanted the customers to have the predictability of, oh, I know my truck always shows up at 9 a.m. on a Monday and 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. So that was valued by their customers. So they deliberately chose to stay on the lower end of the maturity in terms of routing, the amount of analytics they used to take those decisions. But at the same time, they did see the value of keeping it more dynamic. So they were able to find, or we were able to find, a good midpoint where they would run the dynamic routing again and refresh their standard routes every couple of weeks or months, or even biannually in a few DCs, depending on their demand profile. So we looked at their demand profile, we looked at their seasonality in majority of their products that were being served, and based on that, we would decide what should be the frequency of refreshing the standard routes. So doing dynamic, then going back to standards. Doing dynamic and going back to standards. So setting up new standards is what we were doing.
Because the original standards were set right after COVID and they were never refreshed.
Yeah.
That's what we came to know.
Yeah.
And that was like a major source of inefficiency.
Yeah. I wonder if, like how many of those customers are out there, especially the ones who were, the operating models were changed very drastically during COVID, and nobody ever revisited those because they're working.
Those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is sort of we set up this framework this is one way to look at it. There could be many other ways to look at it. It's basically the decision points were for this particular client of ours, they grew pretty inorganically, especially in Canada. In the US, they were more organic growth. So they were acting like a regional player, which was very price conscious in a few regions, and they were acting like a mass national player. But let me just finish my thought, and then we'll come to the question. In a few areas where it was the competing point was just about service. As long as you hit this service in a certain region, the customer was happy to pay the premium for their service. So like the problems were in all four spectrums when you look at this 2x2. Go ahead, sorry.
So in the previous slide, you said that the client wanted to maintain the same static products in order to ensure less attrition, driver attrition, right? So when you recommended a dynamic routing approach, how did you ensure the attrition didn't shoot up?
So that was the core of the problem. That was the pull and push decision between what ops wanted and what commercial sides wanted. So we actually ended up doing a very detailed voice of customer surveys and customer interviews. And what we found out was the customers in general were happy to reset their routes as long as it's not happening every day. So nobody wanted truly dynamic, that every morning my drivers will show up and then the algorithm would tell them what is the best route for today. Like they didn't want the e-commerce model. They didn't want the Amazon model. They wanted enough consistency, but they were happy to revisit that consistency every couple of, depending on the customer, it could be weeks or months. So we were able to find the right balance. So we created customer archetypes, and based on which archetype you fall into, your routing may refresh every couple of weeks to every couple of months. So that's how we were able to achieve it. Go ahead.
I would normally wait till the end, but it's sort of built.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, I prefer this way actually. Yeah.
Okay. So when you think about static routes, you want to have consistent volumes, less volatility, right? Because without that, you're building in inefficiency. Because you have to build in inefficiency for static routes to have volatility in any way. Even if you're I'm assuming when you said we don't want to change the day, you basically did a day-a-week assignment and you're optimizing within that day. So you're doing 5 optimizations a week instead of 1.
Yeah.
You still are leaving money. What sort of fluff or money was left on the table? Because you're going to have variability across the day unless you do a day-a-week assignment and you balance it with assumptions. But you're still doing static routes. Like what? I get the customer is happy, and we've all had customers that have constraints that you're like, okay, whatever. But how much did they leave on the table by you doing that?
So if we did just that, about, I would say, I'll have to look at the numbers, they were very varied, but about, I would say like a quarter of the value, conservatively speaking, would be left on the table. So what we did on top of that was we were able to define service profiles for each customers. So there was the customer literally had this big motto. If you go to the customer headquarters, literally it's written everywhere that customer is king, for example. And then we were able to convince them that maybe the size of the kingdoms also matter. So we were able to decide which customers get to choose how long of a delivery window.
Gotcha.
So, we stratified the customers in A, B, C, D, E, similar.
So you had anchors in the routes. And
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So those C customers, for example, they acted as buffers for us to be able to achieve the value we wanted, and those would be moved around. And we were okay with it. That was a deliberate decision. And we did see some attrition there, but at the same time, we were fortifying, building bigger walls to give even better service and save our A customers who were even happier, and they were happy to have us look at the changing the order compositions and maybe push more private label there, have better margins there. So that's how we recovered the lost sales for the C customers. And actually, there were surprisingly less lost sales than what we were anticipating.
Gotcha. So back in the envelope was 25%.
We were able to go up to 40% in a few anomalies. I would not expect that every time. And I think the first time you refresh it, there's bigger savings. Then every time you do it, it's not. It's mostly maintaining those savings as opposed to getting more.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think you covered this.
Yeah, it's. I think we are already past these slides in discussions.
Okay. Yeah,
but
I think we have.
Yeah, but the stratification. If you go back one slide, even the customer stratification, it was easier, much easier said than done. There were many levers explored. Like, should we be doing it on net earnings? Should we be doing it on contribution margin? Should we be doing it on net margin, operating margins only? There were some warehouses who were recently automated, so of course their operating margins are going to be much, much less, especially for the first few years because the automation hasn't paid off yet. So those DCs, they wanted nothing to do with warehousing costs. So they wanted adjusted contribution margin, which basically is include transportation but exclude operating margin. One of their competitors, their whole network strategy was smaller but a lot of DCs. Their network strategy was bigger DCs, but they were basically they were having more miles deliberately but lesser warehousing cost. So then it became quickly a decision of, we are penalizing our farther away customers because it's by design, it's farther away. So there was like back and forth. We can go on and on for this. But eventually we landed on one of these, which were closer to adjusted contribution margin as their national strategy. And based off that, we stratified the customers.
Makes sense.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. And I mentioned, based on which customer strata you fall in, you could have a different service profile. And we wanted to quantify and make it less and less subjective of what we mean by a different service profile. So what we did was we landed on like these 4 or 5 types of constraints, we call them, which you can play with. So for example, a C customer does not get to choose less than a certain hours of time window. And they do not get to choose more than 1 delivery a week. So delivery frequency, size of the window, consistent days of the week, and the driver to customer mapping are a few things that were seen as the levers or the constraints that you played with in these advanced tools so that you could quantify. If you are okay with any of your C customers not getting the morning slots, which pretty much everybody wanted, then that is how much it's worth to you. So we were able to quantify those opportunity sizes for each of these constraints, which helped bring the sales guys to the table and ask them, if it's worth this. And it was a very, the change management was a real thing here, and we'll get to those slides, but just one comment on that. We were able to very clearly detach who owns what decision. And one of the key things was, like, transportation should not decide if it's a good customer or a bad customer. It's entirely up to the sales guys. But transportation will tell you how much it's costing us if you want to go this route or offer this service. And everybody's logical, so it helped get to the middle ground of, this is the direction we want to go in as a company. So that was what I see the biggest value, such analytical, and I don't want to sell any tool here, but strong analytics helps you take faster and better decisions. That's what we saw happening in real time in such cases. Yeah, this was the ranges we saw, the national, actually across US and Canada, North American ranges of value we were able to see in this particular example. We have seen cases in which, depending on the companies or the clients' strategy that they've used to be competitive in the market. I've seen one case in which driver mapping, when we relaxed the mapping of these 3 or 4 drivers have to be the ones serving this region, when we relaxed those, we have seen savings upside of like a 1/4 miles taken out. It was like just super inefficient. But for this client, this was not a big problem. The biggest unlock for this client was actually the time windows. When I said the clients, one of the mottos was the customer is king, they were actually living that motto and they were proud of it. So irrespective of if you're A customer or a B customer or a C customer, you were getting the prime slots, you were getting 2 hours windows to pick from. And the moment we started loosening those for a long tail of C customers, it created all the buffer we needed to have like very straight, clean routes. So that was one of the biggest levers for these clients. And we were debating quite a bit before putting this slide up. Depending on which constraint you go after first, the sequence matters here. Like I bet if you put the bullet number 2 at the top, you'd see the savings go higher. So a lot of it is the methodology you choose, which sets your org up for success. That's how your org set up. It'll help change the percentages at individual level. But overall, we were able to take out like a quarter of the miles for the clients. That's huge for somebody who's in the food distribution business, who has like 3,000 trucks going out every day. It was a big win for them.
Yeah. And I think part of the efficiency also was hidden backhaul optimization.
Yeah.
Like a lot of empty miles.
It was not just about how to deliver the
Yeah.
Customer demand. It was also about while coming back, can you choose which vendors are around the area and you pick up backhauls and don't haul air coming back.
And doing it
those
like more scientifically versus using Excel-based methods
Yeah.
was leaving some money on the table.
And I'm sure none of these ideas are new. I mean,
Yeah.
they've been there forever. It's just, are we able to execute them with the precision needed?
Exactly.
Is what we were able to achieve here.
So I think what helped, I think this was another slide.
Yeah, it's another example of how we were able to segment the customers in this. And this is an oversimplified view. It was way more than A, B, C, D. Like each of the regions had their own A, B, C, D based on the customer segment you're talking about. But in general, A customers were the ones which represented like 80-ish% of our net margin for that particular region and that particular segment of the market. And they were basically given everything they wanted. In fact, we almost nudged them to be more aggressive. We asked them to pick up 2 hours window and we'll deliver them and we'll serve them instead of like 4 hours, which they were already doing before. For B customers, it was on the borderline. On C and D customers, it was basically, you have to pick at least 6 hours long windows and we will not come to you. We will be there when we will be there, basically. And you will not get to choose more than 2 days a week or 1 day a week, depending on the market. You won't get any off-day deliveries. You won't get any missed time window. Oh, you may get some missed time windows. So that was the profiling we did for them. And we did a bunch of sensitivities depending on the market of how much it's worth to open that extra hour or reduce that extra hour. In a few cases, we were able to give Bs a much better service because it wasn't saving us a lot of money, but it was a newer market for our client and it was worth positioning ourselves as a better service provider for those customers to gather more business. So it was a very region by region, service by service decision and not pan-US. But having some sort of stratification was a pan-US, pan-Canada decision for this customer.
Makes sense. So I guess you covered most of the customer and the strategy part.
Sorry.
And so when we got down to building the solution, we built basic algorithm like just to test out different things, customer windows, and as we keep getting requirements from the BCG team, we obviously had sleepless nights to get the software up and running, but we were able to test delivery frequency, delivery windows, delivery days at a very high level. And then 20-30% is what we saw as savings as. Then in terms of solution methodology, this is more like a model development. It was a mathematical model. So it really started with the baseline. So we had historical data, right? So we created a digital twin, or we replicated all those routes in the model just to see if we are able to mimic how trucks traveled historically with all the constraints, and they were close to the baseline. So that was the state, that was first step. So we quantified the baseline in terms of miles traveled, number of trucks, so on and so forth. Then we figured out that stratification scenario, so we have A, B, C, D customers. And then we started layering on those constraints, relaxing time windows for some, relaxing delivery frequency for some, and we tested a multitude of scenarios to generate a range of savings. And finally, now we are entering implementation phase. So based on what we thought would be the best strategy, that strategy will get implemented. Just that, like, you know, we created baselines for few weeks and few DCs just to test out what the strategies are. But as we get into implementation, all those strategies will be rolled out across a network of DCs. So that's how the plan is. In terms of like the proof of concept, we took into account the customer constraints, which is delivery time windows, delivery frequencies, order quantities, and it was a two-step process. So first we optimized the algorithms, optimized the delivery frequency first, and then based on that delivery frequency, a delivery plan was generated, and for that delivery plan, routes were optimized. So, and so we took into account geographical constraints, the fleet constraints. So the solution not only optimizes routes, it also gives you optimized fleet capacities, you know, what your fleet size should look like on a daily basis, so that you can average it out and you can plan for that fleet.
One thing that was super interesting, sorry for cutting you off, yeah. One thing that was super interesting, and don't mean this to be like a Gyan session, but once we were able to create this data lake of sorts, we were having requests from all these different teams of, hey, now that you have built it, can you also, you know, like there were some capabilities which were all of a sudden available to the client now to be able to adjust. Like there were a few pricing change requests, and they were like, oh, can you tell me a list of all my customers where I have negative DOE but positive contribution margin, anything outside like 250 miles radius where we are likely doing depots, and then is there any pricing inputs we should consider? And then it was amazing how broad impact some things like these could have. We were getting the questions on archetypes around, hey, are these archetypes only for routing decisions, or can we make them for inventory decisions? You know, like for a certain profile of a customer, they need to be slotted only in one DC as opposed to like each slot costs them like $800 or something. So yeah, I think the methodology, I think that's the point you're trying to get to. Like we should not just look at it for routing per se for a food distributor, but this methodology could be applied to like
even pricing.
Yeah,
and
much different functions or different across different industries.
Yeah, that's true. I think there are added benefits of structuring the data, and then you know, sky is the limit.
Yeah.
So this is something which is similar, but just to like whenever you get started on this kind of method, KPIs matter. So the KPIs which we are tracking from the tool were total miles driven, total hours, total routes or total trips, length of route, number of stops, and on time, you know, how many deliveries were happening on time using simulation versus outside those delivery windows. So all these KPIs will help you track what strategy works best by customer segment and overall as you build out these things. And you can literally prepare a playbook for repeatable processes. So you do it for one DC. First DC, I think, took a lot of time, maybe 3 weeks, and a lot of iteration. But every new DC, it was faster, and we were doing more granular adjustments.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. We also used some benchmarks around the service times, right, which is industry standards. So that also goes as part of the total time traveled, and there were some insights around that. Vishal, any matrix you think made more sense to capture?
So I think these routers have been doing their job for like 20 years. Like, you know, they knew what mattered. What they didn't know was how much was it worth changing A to B. How much was it worth having a 28-footer versus a 31-footer? when upgrading their fleets. Like, is it a good idea to have a lease truck or or buy it out outright? So those were the things that they were always going with their hunches that we were able to help them with.
So I think
the practice
what
activities,
was missing was scenario-based analytical
Yeah.
capability, right? That
Yeah.
was missing.
Yeah.
And the legacy tools had some sandbox environments, but it
Yeah.
was not feasible or it was not,
Yeah.
good enough for routers to test these
Yeah.
strategies.
Yeah.
And I think you can speak
Yeah.
to this. Yeah,
And
these
then-
are the challenges.
That was, we thought of adding this for the last 10 minutes of this presentation because this was a massive uplift for the team in terms of the amount of effort we had to do. So it was, I would say, when I look back at this project, I would say 10% of the actual savings in the bank came from the algorithms, maybe 20% came from like our analytics, our process changing, but 70% of the savings actually came from making sure we are able to implement them, making it streamlined enough that the steps are clear. Somebody as lower in the hierarchy as a dispatcher is able to follow what's going on and is not trying to fix things which are not needed to be fixed. So we were able to create, very fine processes on kind of these three lenses: technology, people, and processes. And if you go to the next slide quickly, I'll just give an example. Yeah, we were able to make sure we were able to mimic their current dashboards. We did end up changing some metrics, and we tried to reduce the metrics from like 20 to like top 5, one across safety, one across quality, one across cost, one across efficiency. And then we call them Spark metrics or something to make sure it sticks. And then only one metric mattered for most of the functions. And then every week or every bi-weekly, they'll have a meeting at the shop floor, and then there's a meeting at the regional level every 3 weeks, and then there was a meeting at the national level like every quarter. And then the same metrics were asked, the same questions were hammered, like top down, which drove the incentives to do the same thing. Like it was such a massive effort. I wouldn't have imagined it would be like for something this obvious, it shouldn't take that much time to implement.
I think the last one, right? The dispatching logic, planner behavior.
Yeah. The incentives had to be
driver
aligned.
incentives.
Yeah.
Right. So all those are conversations which continue to happen, and it's not an easy conversation to have.
Yeah. At the end of the project, we had this newfound respect to the change managers in the companies. Yeah.
Yeah. Running models won't get you savings. Actually, that's what we say.
Yeah. I was happy to answer any questions. I didn't want it to be like a one-way session. Happy to answer any questions beyond this case study on the same lines, if you guys have any. Yeah, go for it.
How did you choose your technology?
It was actually surprising. There were no big players who offered what we were looking for, like exactly what, like everybody was offering like 50, 60% or even 70% of what we were trying to offer. So we had to go, it was a deliberate decision to either build something bottoms up, like, Python, Braze, all of these the algorithms are available online, NVIDIA has their own CO-opt, their GPUs available. But then we wanted at the same time to build something which could be handed over to the clients, and they are not data scientists. So we ended up finding the right balance between, hiring in this case, Lambda, who understood the data scientist part of it, but also have the user interface, which would be easy enough for like a router to use on a daily basis. So that's what and we use these tools at the end to develop the answers, and the client will keep on using their current tools, their RoadNets, Descartes of the world for execution purposes. Yeah. But those are not used to refresh the routes.
So if the tool, off-the-shelf tool wasn't available, did Lambda do some customization to help?
Yeah. We actually built the tool while we were doing the project. So that's how, it did help us get there faster. but in the process, we discovered so many things that standard routes and things
I
like
think
that.
where we started from and where we ended, even we didn't anticipate it
Yeah.
to be that different. Yeah.
To be honest, like we started with like Streamlit app,
Yeah.
and we migrated to like a full-fledged commercial application now.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think cost of development, speed of development has really come down with this AI and things like that. But you still need to understand those basics around the requirements and iterate faster on these technologies. So it's
I
really
think
iteration.
going in, our idea was we are okay being 95%
Yeah.
correct if it's faster than 100% correct and slower,
Speed
because we
versus
had the C
accuracy.
customers to play around with. As long as we are meeting our A's and B's, that's 95% of our total earnings. And even C's, we split them into, these are my negative margin customers who, we shouldn't. I'm glad you guys don't know the client name. Otherwise, yeah, we did play around with them quite a bit. Go ahead.
So I've got two questions. One, it's not just something that you dump the data in and you push the button. You ran it in a sequence, or you did multiple iterations, or you did something first and then you did almost like an algorithm, right? You sort of. What order did you build them in, and then how different? You talk about. So I have a customer that we did. They're in food as well, and they were. I guess let me tell you this, and then I'll ask the question. So what they do is they run into high peak periods, and so they have individual business units, and they would run out of trucks, and then they would just go lease a bunch of straight trucks or something like that. And you try to explain to them that it might be better to have a tractor, and if your 28-foot trailer sits half the year, that you have the versatility of changing stuff out. So two questions are, what order did you run your algorithm or build your sequential? Was it day, week assignment, and then that type of stuff? And then how close was the solution? Did you cater the solution to their current fleet, or did you make them change?
So they are using their current softwares because it's more used as an execution tool as opposed to decision-making tool.
So they put in their equipment and designed around their
Yep. And then on your previous question, actually that exact same, we have done, I'm not sure if you were involved in the past, but we have done this exact work wherein the solution we ended up aligning on was, the first alignment was on, do we have to be prepared for the worst day of the year, or is it okay to be prepared for second worst day or third worst week of the year? Yeah, and then we are okay with not having a 98% OTIF that day or that week. And then everybody had the ranking around, so we knew which customers will not get their demand that week of the year. And then as we took a decision of, okay, we are going to be prepared for this second worst week of the year, what are we going to do with those extra trailers? And that's what we used them for backhauling. So we started a lot of drop trailers, wherein we would just, keep the trailer at the client, at the vendor, then every time that any driver is going around there, they just, drop an empty, pick up the filled one, and then take it away. So there were like ways around you could do that, but those were very specific to a certain region. And to your second question, so hence the sequence was less about CapEx. It was more about operating expenses reduction. So it was always about driver mapping, time windows, days of the week, delivery frequency, days of the week. And at the end, how many routes do we take out, which means how many trucks, tractors, trailers do we take out. So that was the sequence.
Executionally, it was days of the week and delivery frequency first, followed by time windows and driver mappings second.
The day of week and delivery frequency, you have to sort of work together in order to balance it. So you could have, if all your big customers come and say, my delivery day is Monday, you're screwed.
Yeah. Everybody wants 7 a.m. Monday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. Is it the last page? I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, feel free to reach out to Gaurav or me. Happy to answer any questions, even after the session. This is what we
are on booth 513 in the 500 aisle. So we'll be happy to show you some scenarios and OptiFlow in action on what those scenarios look like and how you can build them out.
Yeah. So, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
5 minutes.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vishal.
Yeah.